dance scenario has been out for quite a while. According to the score, it's been out since 1989. And the reason why I mention that is because orchestras have been playing this for a long time. So being able to find the spots where orchestras tend to fall apart gets easier when lots and lots of groups have played this. The first place where orchestras tend to fall apart is right here in measure 17 with the double down bows. What tends to happen here is that the violins rush and we end up with phasing between the violins and the violas, cellos, and basses. There are a couple problems here that lead to rushing. The first one is getting them to be able to set the bow in between each note is very important, especially here in the rest. Like they need to play and they need to set the bow in the rest and prepare for this next note. If they're not doing that and they're just skipping steps, they're going to get faster and faster. That's why here in the teaching companion, which is available on teachingorchestra.com, the rhythm exercise, I just have them play one note and then set in the rest, and then play the next note, set in the rest, and just make sure that they can play and set. You don't need to start at quarter note equals 132, concert tempo. You can slow this down and make sure that every student uses the right technique. And that way, when they start doing the double stops, or if you're having them do quadruple stops or whatever, then they're going to have more success. So we take that and then we apply it back to measure 17, where we add the left hand, we add the second finger G and the first finger B here. Or you can still have them play divisi. Okay, we're going to also run into the issue that they're just playing lights out, and maybe your violas and low strings aren't playing loud enough, so they can't hear each other and they're not listening to each other. So then they take off even more and they leave everybody else in the dust. It's good to have balance here. Make sure to balance this stuff. Make sure that your low strings are playing nice and forte here, and have your violins back off a little bit. They don't really need to play that loud. I think we can all agree that this is not melody. I mean, it's fun, but it's not melody. The next issue that we have is in measure 33 in the cantabile section. Now, your low strings start playing pizzicato around measure 27. And they have 4 measures of that. And then at 33, your upper strings come in with long notes. And sometimes we end up with rushing issues here too, because pizzicato tends to rush anyway. And a lot of times younger players will rush whole notes because they're not using enough bow. They're not bowing from frog to tip. So do your students have the left-hand technique to be able to bow from frog to tip? If they don't, I encourage you to have them practice long bows. And in season 1, episode 1, I have a demonstration exercise on how to do long bows with your students, how to get them to be flexible with the wrist and loosen up the bow hand so that they can be nice and flexible and be able to manipulate the wrist and add the shoulder when needed at the very frog and at the very tip, being able to push out a little bit. And you might also want to have them use some motion. You might want to have them use their body weight too as they're bowing to shift their weight against the bow stroke so that they can put down the weight onto the string. All right, on the next page, all of this is kind of tricky because we have the low strings that are using the technique that the upper strings were using. They don't necessarily have to use down bows for all this. They can go down, up, down, which I would actually probably do, but they still need to be able to set in the rests. And so if you go back to the teaching companion, just make sure that they're setting in the rests and they know what to do, or else this is going to rush and take off. And then we have the other problem of having students play 11 beats before they get an up bow here, and then a couple of down bows. So you might want to have them do some staggered bows. You might want to break this bow right here, and then they'll start up bow and then have them do a down bow somewhere in between, but not at the same time as your stand partner. And then they got the up bow here. So changing this bowing would probably be very helpful to your students, but also when they're sustaining for that long, they might not count. So make sure that in measure 50, when you're conducting, you're going to want to use some passive conducting. Okay, you're only going to want to give beat 1 and beat 4. If you conduct 2 and 3, it's redundant information. So then redundant information is confusing. They're sustaining, so you have beat 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and that's what's going to get them in right here at 51. And then you're going to want to, you could just conduct 1 and 3 if you want, and then you're going to want to cue in your low strings here too. With these staggered entrances, there's a lot of room to fall apart here in this section. This is one of the most dangerous parts, except for the end. This place tends to fall apart quite a bit, if it's gonna fall apart. Also on cues, make sure you're looking at your players and not at your score. And if your students are used to rote teaching, they're gonna be looking at you hopefully, and you can look at them and be able to make eye contact and deliver that cue right to them so they know, hey, this is for you. And if it's for multiple sections, if it's for second violins, or first violins, second violins, and violas, split the difference. Like, look at the second violins if they're in the middle, and give the cue to everybody. Okay, 61, we kind of have the opposite problem. We have the low strings that are sustaining. Second violins and violas rest, and they're also going to have rests here in 62 while the low strings are still tying. So right here, you need to make sure to give a nice obvious cue to your seconds and violas, and then you might want to, with the left hand, cut off for the rest here. So that might be a little bit confusing because, usually you give the cutoff with the left hand, and usually you cue with the left hand, and a lot of times your low strings are on this side of the orchestra and your seconds and violas are right here. So what you can do is you can cue in your seconds and violas, you can cue them in with your, actually I'd probably use this sort of a cue because I'm not cueing in a person, I'm cueing in multiple sections, and you can do the release with your right hand as you're doing that. So then you release here, but you gotta get your low strings back in here, okay? So you release and cue again to the low strings, and that's going to be a right hand cue here. If you look in this section right here, it's imitative. It's a canon at the octave, and it's 2 beats apart. So you can have them all practice this together just to learn this section until the canon breaks here. So that's just a little practice tip that you can use if you'd like. Here at 73, orchestras really like to rush. And the problem is they can rush, but then if we look ahead here, first violins have a lot of runs, and if they're not rock solid on this and you get going too fast, it's gonna fall apart because they can't play it. So slow it down. Even if you go onto Kendor and you listen to the studio orchestra play this, they even rush here at 73. I mean, not a lot, but enough that it's obvious. So make sure that the students re-grip the string. If you're having them play off the string, make sure that they reset for the next quarter note. Otherwise, they're gonna rush. So be very, very careful at 73. It repeats here right before 86, and that can make it even worse. Now, it's indicated that they should play in the lower half of the bow here. I don't do that at all. I think that's going to be a big problem because you're going to have lower strings playing in the lower half of the bow, and that's going to make them rush, and then your violas might not have enough wrist flexibility to play this the way you want it in the lower half of the bow either. So I'd have them play closer to the middle here. Playing at the frog is not the only way to play loud. In fact, if your students can't play loud in the middle of the bow, it probably means that they can't grip the string yet, so you might want to work on getting your students to grip the string. I have in my Off the String episode in season 1, in the spiccato episode, I have them do what I call trampoline bows, where they just kind of flex the bow onto the string, and it teaches them how to establish that grip. Can they bend the string? Can they bend the bow hair? In measure 94, we have these double down bows again, just like we did in 17. You can't just assume that, oh, well, they got it right at 17, so they're gonna get it right here at 94. Now, you're probably gonna have to reteach. You're probably gonna wanna have to do this again and go through the teaching companion again and work on balance again. Like, everything is, you're just gonna have to reteach just to make sure that they don't rush here. The end of this really likes to rush a lot. Another issue that we have is this tremolo here in 92. Tremolos are hard to count anyway. Something about just moving the bow back and forth rapidly just does something to your brain. I don't know what it is, but I even have trouble with tremolos. So again, you can manage this well with cues. 102, they're tremoloing And then, make sure to get your violas and low strings in, give them a nice cue here. And then you're going to want to cue on beat 1 here with the accents, because that's where the tremolo breaks. So you're going to want to cue, and then they retake to the frog. So passive beat on beat 2, don't conduct beat 2. So just give 1 and then give 3, don't give 4, and then 1 and 2 and 3, 4. So they're tremoloing 3, 4, 1, 3, 1 and 2 and 3, 4. Also, make sure that beat 4 is long. A lot of times orchestras will clip these open Gs. So have it long, let that note ring. In the next video, I'm gonna go over common problems. I talked about a lot of common problems, and even in this video, where they fall apart, but these are gonna be more spot-specific common problems. So I hope you stay tuned for the next video.